Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulullah. So today we're going to speak about happiness. But you don't look that happy. Okay, you look happier now. So happiness is contagious, right? Like the previous speaker spoke about, when you are studying for a degree, or you're going to work, or you're doing something else, your end goal is happiness. Happiness is where you want to be, right? So we don't, as human beings, we don't really disagree with the idea of happiness. Human beings love disagreeing, right? And especially philosophers, they love disagreeing. But one thing that nobody seems to disagree about is that they want to be happy. That seems to be a consensus, that everybody wants to be happy. Now, the pursuit of happiness is a topic which is very deep. And like it was mentioned in the previous lecture, that, you could speak for hours about, how someone transformed their life. I'm going to speak about this from a bit of a different perspective. And that is actually by contrasting the atheistic understanding of happiness and the Islamic understanding of happiness. Okay? And spend a bit more time on the atheistic version. How many people have had a similar experience to this? There you go, right? So, you see something, you're like, that looks pretty, that looks great, that looks fantastic. And when you go and buy it, it looks like it got, run over by a car. Yeah, it's not pleasant. That's kind of life. That's kind of life. Here in Pakistan, from a young age, we are indoctrinated in Hollywood and Bollywood and Lollywood. And you see a couple, when we were young, running around in trees in muddy somewhere, and by magic, they happen to change their clothes 3 times in a matter of 5 minutes. And they're dancing around in the trees. And that's the blueprint that people have when they think about happiness. That's like what a happy marriage would be like. And that image that we have, the greenery and the mountains and people running around trees, the reality is the sky is not so blue, it's a bit more grey. And then you see the mother-in-law, she comes out from behind the tree. Yeah? So life is like this, you see something, it looks fantastic, it looks great, but then when you get down to it, it's not really. So when we're chasing happiness, there's people calling us in different directions. This is important to understand, right? So there's some people who are like, you will be happy if you follow Islam. And now we have another group of people in the world who are saying, you'll be happy if you leave Islam. You'll be happy if you leave religion, if you leave God altogether. And look at us, we are successful, we have this, we have that, we have science, we have technology. So running in the wrong direction, you're not going to get where you need to be. So we need to see what version of happiness is the correct version and which is actually false. So starting off with this idea that a very popular notion in the Western world, which is being imported into the Muslim world, which is, if you're in Pakistan here and you go to the market and you need to buy a phone charger and it's going to cost, say, 500 rubles, joking, rupees. So you got 500 rupees for a charger. And the person says to you, this charger was made in Germany. And by the way, there's another charger that was made in Sialkot, Pakistan. Which one are you going to buy? Did someone say Sialkot? Must be a Marxist here. No, you're going to say what? You're going to say, no, I'm going to buy the German, right? I'm going to buy the... Why? Because we look up to people who are superior in terms of material wealth and technology and education. But interestingly, we don't just unconsciously accept their products, their physical products. We also start downloading some of their other programs, like liberalism, feminism, Darwinism, scientism, stuff like this. We start downloading these things without realizing actually these conflict with Islam. Buying a charger doesn't conflict with Islam, whether you buy a UK one or a German or Pakistani one. But of course, a system which is a rival to Islam, like scientism, you will have a conflict. These gentlemen are known as the Four Horsemen. The four horsemen, famously, you know, the biblical thing about the end of the world and the apocalypse and stuff. But these are the four horsemen of atheism. So today we're going to be doing a sort of tour of their worldview. What I'm going to be arguing is that what they speak about, they cannot justify. So they speak about making the world a better place. They speak about happiness. They speak, strangely nowadays, more than before, they speak about spirituality. However, I'm going to be showing their worldview is inconsistent. Like if I'm a Muslim and I decide, right, I'm going to pray Salah, that fits within my worldview because I believe in God. But if someone says, right, I'm a materialist, atheist, Darwinist, naturalist, and then they try and say and act like, I believe in human rights, when human rights are pure social constructs, they don't actually exist. So I'm going to be showing there's an internal contradiction in their worldview. This is the famous book, which was published at a time, I think, when all of you were not born, 1976, unless there's somebody here who was born before that. So this is actually a really depressing, I know I'm saying it with a big smile, but a really depressing worldview. It's the worldview that if you break down human beings and human behavior and who we are, from the atheistic perspective, the highest rationale of our existence, as Richard Dawkins says in The Selfish Gene, is the preservation of our genes. Not these genes, but the preservation of our genes. So that basically means everything that you do in your life that's not really this, whether you do art, painting, studying at Nust University, any of those things from an evolutionary perspective are just going to be seen as either byproducts of survival and reproduction, which is the main purpose, the rationale of life, or it's like an evolutionary runaway thing, right? It's like an unintended consequence of survival and reproduction. Again, even recently, there's an interesting victim. In fact, two victims. There are two victims of this atheistic worldview. One is happiness and one is truth. Now you may be thinking, oh, like, what's going on here? So I want you to consider something. If what they're saying is right, if what the four horsemen is saying is right, if what the atheistic worldview is saying is correct, then not only is morality out the window, not only is it the case that morality doesn't exist, the idea of truth and the idea of fiction, according to a Darwinian history of life, you need truth and fiction for human cooperation. And it's human cooperation which is the genesis of human emotions. Darwin was the first to make human emotions into a scientific area to be explained by his theory. So if you're happy, if you're sad, if you're angry, or if you're ecstatic, or if you're depressed, if you have anxiety, all of these things are actually mechanisms to help you survive and reproduce. That's all it is. Randolph Nesse, he is an evolutionary academic, and he gives the example that once there was this professor who, like the professors in Nust University, find it very hard when they have to mark papers. And he had a stack of papers and, stuff like this. So he was quite anxious, and he asked Randolph Nesse, I'm quite anxious, can you help me out and stuff? So Nesse gave him or said to him, you should take antidepressants or something like this, right? So he took antidepressants. So this professor, a few weeks later or some time later, when Nesse went to go meet him, and he said, how are you feeling now? How are you feeling? And the professor goes, I feel great. My anxiety is gone. The anxiety that I had previously is gone. However, there's a stack of papers I haven't marked. Right? So then Nesse thought to himself, and he writes about this, that it was the anxiety which was making him do the work. Because if you don't have anxiety, if you don't have fear of something, you don't get the work done. And that work was linked, of course, to his career, and that career, of course, he can break down to survival and reproduction. Yeah? So that's the basic idea. Now, even here, in 21 Lessons for the 21st Century, the latest book by the evolutionary academic Yuval Noah Harari, he basically makes the same case, that the power of human cooperation depends on a delicate balance between truth and fiction. So there's two victims of this atheistic worldview: happiness and truth. How are they victims? Because these things, they don't actually have intrinsic value. Truth is not intrinsically valuable. Happiness is not intrinsically valuable. These things are instrumental. Okay, let me give you an example of that. You have a child. Is that a good-looking child, firstly? Everyone say, ah. Only the sisters are saying, ah. Brothers, come on, have some, stop being a man, yeah? Just for a few seconds. Isn't that a cute baby? Say, ah. Oh, there you go. There you go. Stop crying now, yeah? That's enough. All right. So basically, that child is a beautiful child. And we would love that child, we would take care of that child, and a mother would dress up the child and do stuff like that. However, from an evolutionary perspective, a mother takes care of that child not because she cares about that child's happiness as an end in of itself. Not because of that. It's because that child happens to have the genes that the mother has. So the love that a mother has for her child, from a Darwinian perspective, is not intrinsic, is not an end in of itself, it's not an ultimate desire. It's actually a instrumental mechanism. I know I'm smiling right now, but that's extremely disturbing if someone actually holds that worldview. In fact, in The Selfish Gene, Richard Dawkins, what he says is that it's after all to a mother's benefit if her child is taken away and adopted, because then she has more resources to raise another child, right? Of course, we don't see that in the real world, but it just goes to show you that if you really truly care about somebody, that the idea of love, right? Or the idea of happiness, or any of these ideas, they don't have any intrinsic value. They are purely instrumental in helping you survive and reproduce. So essentially, it's a worldview in which there is no ultimate hope. There is no even ultimate emotions. You know, I feel great, I feel happy, I feel sad, I feel depressed, I feel ecstatic. All of these are mechanisms to help you survive and reproduce. It doesn't really matter what those are. Anxiety is no more valuable than happiness. Because remember that professor, happiness, if that's what motivates him, if that's what helps him survive, then that's what helps him survive. If it's anxiety, it helps him mark the papers, it's anxiety. So there's no ultimate hope. There's no ultimate meaning, unless somebody wants to say there is meaning in survival and reproduction, and survival and reproduction is the main purpose of life. Yeah, then you have some sort of mechanical meaning. But other than that, there is no meaning. You know, people speak about, let's make the world a better place. How many people here, have you ever heard that? Let's make the world a better place. I want to ask you a question. Isaac Newton and a rat, right? Which one of them is better? Isaac, I'm glad he said that, Isaac Newton, right? However, from an evolutionary perspective, who's better, Isaac Newton or a rat? A rat, why? Isaac Newton, how many children did he have? None. So from an evolutionary perspective, he is less fitter than a rat. Yeah? If that's depressing, welcome to the world of atheism. Yeah? So that's why I'm saying that there's this hypocrisy that they speak about, you know, justice, human rights, love, civilization, morals, ethics, sympathy, empathy, altruism. But in reality, they just have survival and reproduction, and everything else is a byproduct of that. No purpose. There is no ultimate purpose of life. There is no morality. That cute child that you saw, if you go up to that child and hug that child, imagine that. Everybody around you would say that's a good action. You hugged a child. If you go up and kick that child, everybody would agree that's an evil action. Yet from an evolutionary perspective, from a cold, materialistic, naturalistic perspective, you have atoms, and you have atoms, and you have different rearrangement of matter. That's all you have. There is no right or wrong here, if you want to say that we just want to look at the world from a naturalistic perspective. And there is no ultimate value. There is no ultimate value to life. And sadly, there is no love. There is no happiness. All of these things are pure, dry, mechanical, proximate mechanisms for the ultimate aim of Darwinism, which is survival and reproduction. This is why Friedrich Nietzsche, he is a much better atheist, a way better atheist than the likes of Dawkins, Hitchens, Harris and Dennett, these four horsemen that I mentioned. Why? The reason is he understood the implications of atheism. He's the one who famously said, anyone remember his famous statement? What's Friedrich Nietzsche's famous statement? God is dead. That was him. And he understood that you can't have this worldview in which you say there's no hope, no meaning, no morals, none of these things, and then still claim atheism and still claim to live a life in which you want to make the world better, or you believe your purpose is greater than survival and reproduction. He famously said, who is better, they who promote truth over happiness or happiness over truth? Because from a purely truth perspective, happiness is unattainable if Darwinism is true, if atheism is true. Why? Because happiness has no intrinsic value. Truth has no intrinsic value. None of these things actually have any value. Anyone remember the scene from The Matrix? Okay, so we get Morpheus who says to Neo, you can have the blue pill. And what happens when you take the blue pill? You'll just go back to your deluded life of your social constructs of right and wrong and these things, right? Or you can take the red pill, the pill of truth. You can take the red pill, in which you have to swallow the fact that you are in a matrix and all of this is an illusion. So today's materialistic, naturalistic world, this plastic world, we are told, take the blue pill, just take the blue pill. Doesn't matter, just escapism, right? Don't worry about it. Just do it. Just do it, right? What's interesting, you know, I remember many years ago, I heard this and I've been hearing it since. Follow your heart. Anyone heard that? Raise your hands if you heard that. Follow your heart. What if your heart's corrupt? Anyone ever thought of that? What if you have the heart of Hitler? But we have this world in which just do it. Impulse, do it. Interestingly enough, anyone heard of this beautiful gentleman? Anyone can tell me his name? Aleister Crowley. Someone who is an occultist, someone who believed in pleasure and just, even though he lived at the beginning of the 20th century, his views on drugs and sex and everything were so liberal, even today people are disgusted by them, even today, right? Now he believed he was a prophet and he was inspired by this supernatural entity when he went to Egypt, and he had his own religion called Thelema. And the law, which was a hedonistic law, which was a law of just doing what you want, the law was, do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law, which you could just put as a Nike slogan, just do it. However, that is not, as we're going to see, something that makes you happy. I'm going to speak about following desires now, right? Because we live in a world in which is instant gratification, right? You want a relationship? You can contact someone on Facebook. You want something to drink, something to get you intoxicated? You could do this. Constant following of desires. When previously, the spiritual traditions were, stay away from that nonsense. However, what's interesting from a scientific perspective, here are some brain scans. So, you have some brain scans on your left, which is a healthy brain. A healthy brain. And on the right, you have a brain which is addicted. Could be addicted to anything. Cocaine, meth, alcohol, porn, games, whatever. You're addicted to something. Now what happens is, a normal healthy person, when they get a desire, when they fulfill a desire, they get, if you scan their brain, they get a region which is yellow, and then in the inside you get a region which is reddish. The red is a lot of pleasure, the yellow is less pleasure. What's interesting is dopamine 2 receptors, which is being used in this, these are the happy chemicals, if you like. When you continuously fulfill your desires, someone's continuously addicted to pornography, someone's continuously playing video games, someone's continuously drinking, continuously doing drugs, continuously addicted to fame, whatever it is, your dopamine receptors go into overdrive and they get blunted, right? They get blunted. And then the people, if you scan their brains who are addicted to this materialistic plastic world, you find their level of pleasure is not as great as it was before, because they've overused their receptors. And so what you find is that you get a yellow region, but the red region is almost gone. Which is why when people are addicted to something, they're like, man, I'm not getting the kick I used to get in the past. The reason is you've just absolutely destroyed your brain. And Islam says something which makes a lot of sense from this scientific perspective today, which is that you control your desires. You don't just do what you want. You don't just do it. Isn't this a cute monkey? Oh, less ours than the child, right? Okay. This monkey, it wasn't this exact monkey, but I needed a picture of a monkey, so I thought might as well use this one. So they did this study on a monkey, right? Put a monkey in a cage, as you do, and there was a light that switched on randomly in the cage, and when the light switched on, the food came into a little area, and the monkey would go press the button and the food would come out. Okay? So the monkey's just sitting there chilling, thinking about, I don't know, quantum mechanics. Boom! You get the light's on. The monkey, they study his brain, whoosh, dopamine levels go really high. Really high. Then when the monkey goes towards the food, the banana, samosa chaat, whatever it is, grabs it, the dopamine levels of course go down. That's always happens. The dopamine is the highest when you're further away. As soon as you get to the desire, it goes down. But it was guaranteed every time the light switches on, you're going to get the food coming, it's going to press the button and he gets the food. What they did in this experiment is they inserted a random variable. What they basically did is this. Normally when the light switched on, monkey knew, right, food time, go press the button, food comes out. They introduced a variable where it wasn't guaranteed the food's going to come out. It wasn't guaranteed. So what was going to happen was, the monkey goes, presses the button when he sees the light, 50-50. Sometimes the food comes, sometimes it doesn't. There's a random variable. However, the dopamine levels, you would expect them to go down because it's uncertain whether it's going to get the food. It actually was the reverse. The dopamine was way higher. Right? So even from a purely scientific perspective, I know science changes and whatnot, but what we know right now by direct observation is following your desires, 1, will not give you happiness. 2, restricting your desires actually gives you a healthier brain and more likely to give you pleasure. And 3, human beings love uncertainty. We love uncertainty in terms of desires. And the beautiful thing about Jannah, as was mentioned in the previous lecture, is a place which you cannot imagine, you cannot comprehend. It is what the human eye has not seen, the human ear has never heard, the human mind has never conceived of. Who's this handsome gentleman? Okay, what films was Jim Carrey involved in? Mask, of course, is there. What else? Ace Ventura. Liar, Liar. I've never heard of that. Probably is. Okay, what else? My favorite, Dumb and Dumber. Was it him? Oh, I don't remember. Truman Show. Liar, Liar, right? This guy spent his entire life the way that a young person would wish their life was spent. They had fame, money, traveling the world, happiness supposedly. Yet now he's this old man with a grey beard. His youth has left him. And he said something beautiful. He said, I wish everybody has what I have, so that they know this is not the answer. So nowadays if you look at youngsters, right, what they're doing, right? Instagram, Facebook, Periscope, God knows what, yeah? But these things will not give you happiness. These things will not give you happiness. We know this through human experience. Anyone seen this before? I knew it was going to be the sisters because they study psychology, of course. That's why marriages are so healthy nowadays, mashallah, tabarakallah. Right? So, this is what? Who made this? Maslow. Fantastic. Abraham Maslow, right? Now, this is his famous pyramid of needs. So you start off, and this is sort of chronological in terms of the way you grow up. Start off, you need food, you need water, you need these things. And when somebody's even at middle age, but if they don't have these basic things like food, water, shelter, they don't think about something higher above this, as going up this pyramid. So then as you go up, psychological needs are fulfilled, then you start thinking about safety. After safety, love and belonging. Then self-esteem, and lastly, self-actualization. However, there's something very recently I discovered, something amazing. Later on, he changed his pyramid. Does anyone know that? He actually changed his pyramid so above self-actualization, which is about you, self-actualization is about you, he put self-transcendence. Having a goal beyond yourself. Right? That doesn't make sense if the highest rationale, as Richard Dawkins says, is survival and reproduction, which is right and there at the bottom. Yeah? Self-transcendence. Now, I was reading some philosopher trying to give his understanding of this, and he said, look, this could be referring to something mystical, something spiritual, some connection with the ultimate reality, truth, or whatever it is. However, connecting with a higher goal is something which makes sense from an Islamic perspective, because we were created to connect with who? Allah. So even from a psychological perspective, we understand that this Darwinian worldview, this atheistic worldview doesn't make any sense. So now let's go back. Let's go back to Morpheus, right? He's giving us the blue pill. We've tried the blue pill. Some of us have experience of this, right? You try the blue pill. You try and follow your life in a hedonistic way, and you get nowhere. So now we're going to try which pill? Red pill. So let's go for the red pill, which is truth. What's beautiful is in the atheistic worldview, truth has no intrinsic value, only instrumental value. Happiness has no intrinsic value, it's an instrumental desire to help you survive and reproduce. And these two are at odds with each other. They're at odds with each other. However, the beautiful thing is, in Islam, we follow the truth and the truth will make us happy. We don't have to accept Nietzsche's idea, do you choose truth over happiness or happiness over truth? No, we believe you're going in the right direction. Not like the rider in the beginning of the presentation. You're going in the right direction, and that will also give you happiness. Islam gives you a very simple idea. It says we are made up of something physical, and therefore physical things can sustain us. But we're also made of something spiritual, and that spiritual thing can only be fed through God. Because God created us. So the Islamic conception of spirituality is that human beings, we were created for a relationship. If someone asks me, can you summarize Islam? What is Islam? Is it halal, haram? Is it this? Is it that? Is it, Hanafi fiqh? What is it? Islam is a relationship. That's all it is. It's a relationship between you and your Creator. That's all it is. It's really not more complicated than that. And because of that relationship with your Creator, you have to have a certain relationship with mankind. That's it. And the relationship with the Creator, this is a direct root of our soul being fulfilled, of us fulfilling self-transcendence way beyond us, right? And that self-transcendence, that when we connect with the higher reality, that's the only thing that's going to give us happiness. Now, spirituality, when I obviously, I'm in the industry, if you like, for lack of a better term, of refuting atheism, talking to atheists, challenging them, studying them, you know, all that type of stuff. I've seen a shift in the atheist movement in the last 10 years. They moved away from this crude, scientific, rational, naturalistic point of view, and some of them now are trying to talk about spirituality, which is so funny. Because spirituality, which Sam Harris, as some of you may know, he wrote a book called Waking Up. Even though he's a militant atheist, he's now talking about connecting, meditating, feeling grateful, right? Consciousness and all this stuff. And the interesting thing is that if spirituality is true, which is what Sam Harris is saying to the other atheists, he's saying to them, if we don't acknowledge spirituality is the real thing, we're going to lose out to traditional religion, basically, right? We're going to have a disadvantage. So he's saying spirituality is the real thing. Now, if spirituality is the real thing, atheism, naturalism, Darwinism, and all these types of isms, by definition, are false. So Sam Harris is not realizing he's setting up himself for a trap, and the movement for a trap. If spirituality is the reality, then physicalism, the idea that everything is naturalistic, is false. Why? Because spirituality, by definition, is something metaphysical, is beyond nature. Which is why, funnily enough, I don't know if anybody knows of this recent conversation. These two horsemen, one of the horsemen, he fell off, he died, right, Hitchens, but you got these two horsemen left. Sam Harris was talking about, you know, meditating and consciousness and this and that, and Richard Dawkins was like, I can't stand this. So at least on the minimum, they say spirituality is a reality, right? What's the best explanation? Is it Islam or is it the atheistic worldview? And the thing is, the Islamic worldview in terms of spirituality is very beautiful, very simple. It's this: we were created for a relationship with Allah, and that relationship is a relationship of love, hope, and fear. And in this life, we are like a bird flying to Allah. We are like a bird going towards Allah in terms of our ibadah. We are directing ourselves towards the Creator. And on this journey to Allah, not physical journey, but this journey to Allah, this spiritual journey to Allah, one wing is hope, one wing is fear, and the main body of the bird is love. And when you enter Jannah, the hope and fear is gone, and only love enters. And Allah says what in the Quran? In the Hadith Qudsi. Whoever loves to meet me, I want to meet them. Whoever hates to meet me, doesn't want to meet them. So love is a reality. Happiness is an ultimate goal. It's not intrinsic, it's not instrumentally valuable, it's intrinsically valuable. Truth is intrinsically valuable. It's not just a survival mechanism. You know, and the interesting thing is, from a Darwinian perspective, truth is incidental. Truth is something you just need to survive. What's the most important thing is survival. You can survive on true beliefs or false beliefs. However, when you ask these atheists or Darwinists, why do you want to follow this particular way of life? They'll say, because it's true. It's true. But truth and falsehood, following truth over falsehood, is a moral decision, which they can't account for. So when you look at spirituality, the reality of spirituality, which atheists, thank God, are now starting to accept, and Muslims also accept, who has the best explanation? Let's look at it from this perspective. From the atheistic perspective, it's a self-contradiction. Because spirituality, by definition, is not physical. 2, spirituality, when you speak about it from an atheistic perspective, it sounds initially appealing, but if you ask them, what do you mean? I remember a few years ago when I went to a school in somewhere near High Wycombe, outside of London. There was the head teacher of the school. She was an atheist, and she said, I'm a spiritual atheist. At that time, I didn't ask her that a follow-up question. This is almost 9 years ago. I should have actually asked her, what on earth do you mean by spiritual atheist? They actually talk about gratitude. But for gratitude, you need to anchor it to something. You can't just anchor gratitude in some Platonic domain. You have to actually say who you're grateful to. So from their perspective, spirituality challenges their worldview. However, from our perspective, spirituality fits perfectly. It dovetails with the Islamic perspective. Why? Because who are we grateful to? Allah. Who do we worship? Allah. Who do we love? Allah. Why do we value truth? Because Allah is al-haq. So truth has intrinsic value. Why do we want to be happy? Why? Because we were created for a relationship. It's not just for survival and reproduction. Everything good I have said is from Allah. Every mistake is from myself. Jazakallah khair for listening.